Hi, welcome to Asked and Answered, everyone. The only advice show on YouTube.
Of everything. Not just finance. All advice.
There's no other advice on this platform, and I include Jordan Peterson in that statement. That man's never given advice a day in his life. But before we get into today's episode of Asked and Answered, I just wanted to quickly give a shout out to Monarch, which is not only the budgeting app that I use every day and found independently after I learned that Mint was going to be shedding off its mortal coil and leaving this world, and I was desperate to find a good Mint replacement. I actually found it by Googling Mint replacement and ended up using it and loving it, and it turns out it is like the number one Mint replacement as voted by users, and it's just all around an absolutely wonderful budgeting app. If you're someone who is looking to get kind of a hold on your money on a day-to-day basis, it is absolutely perfect for that. You can do things like obviously track your net worth. You can share your expenses with other people that you maybe live with or share expenses with otherwise. It's great for day-to-day budgeting, looking back at your purchases, doing long-term goals and planning, and just generally feeling like you have a handle on your money. I literally check my Monarch app compulsively at this point. I check it like 20 times a day because I'm working toward a money goal and it soothes me to look at it. But anyway, they are truly an awesome company. They don't sell any of your data to third parties, which is like pretty rare in this space. And just like the user experience is awesome. It's easy enough for me to use and understand at a glance, which is saying a lot because I'm pretty bad with technology. So anyway, check out Monarch. Please use our link if you want to try it out. And if you use our link, you also get 50% off your first year, which is a pretty good deal. And I'm out here paying full price like a sucker. I got to re-up on that deal. I'm here with Chelsea Fagan. I realized I didn't even introduce you last episode. Who even were you? I'm Chelsea Fagan, founder and CEO of The Financial Diet and woman who loves to talk about money. And you are?
Erin Lowry, author of Broke Millennial, and woman who holds many opinions and loves to share them.
That's true. So today we are here to talk about a topic that is certainly not in my wheelhouse, but is in Erin's, which is to say children, having them, being a parent of them.
Paying for them.
You know, I'm going to drop my pennies into the fountain here and there, but this is primarily questions that I'm not necessarily equipped to answer. So I hope, Erin, that you came prepared. What would you say is your number one piece of advice just about having children in general?
Want them.
I
mean, listen, it sounds silly, but that it should be something that you do because you really, really want to do it, and that you interrogate for yourself that that's something that you really want to do. It's hard.
One thing I've learned from watching countless hours of couples therapy with Dr. Orna is that people are just out here having all kinds of kids in all kinds of circumstances. There was one couple, I can't remember what their names were. Yes, I can, because they had the same name. Their names were Michael and Michal.
Yikes.
And they were one of the most my anxiety was on 100 watching this couple in their first couple sessions, because they were like horrendous to each other, especially she to him. It was like, there were moments where I was like, this is giving abuse. Like, this is crazy to watch. Cut to episode 4 of them where she's like, are you not going to say congratulations? And she stands up and if you see this, it was fucking crazy. She puts her thing under. She's 6 months pregnant because apparently in the prior episodes, they talked about how a huge part of their dispute was that she wanted more kids and he did not. And so I guess she explains to Dr. Orna that what she did was she was I was going to switch over to my new pack of birth control, and instead I just threw it in the toilet. And Dr. Orna's how do you feel about this, to the guy? And he was like, I mean, I'm happy. And I'm like, it really, I don't say this lightly. Watching couples therapy in the winter is my number one treatment for seasonal affective depression or disorder, because I watch that shit and I'm like, actually, my life is fine.
I'm great.
Actually, I'm doing great.
10 out of 10 across the board.
I'm not just manufacturing insane problems with this person that I am choosing to live with. I say that to say couples therapy has really taught me that people are just out here having kids willy-nilly with who the hell ever.
Yeah.
So don't do that, is your advice.
I wouldn't, personally.
But also, if the genders were reversed on that and the guy was like, oh yeah, she's pregnant because I just sabotaged our birth control without her consent, we would be like, that man should be in prison.
Yes.
This is crazy. Couples therapy with Dr. Orna, one of the best shows on television, because again, you can't walk away from that with any other feeling than actually my life is fine.
So my couples therapy I saw the first season, I think, and then I was watching whatever season was on Delta over the summer on the way to France.
Yeah.
I watched a bunch of them. And then I was so angry because we boarded our plane for the return on Delta. We can bleep that. We don't need to keep any of this. I'm just sharing.
Did they change their library?
No. We had to deplane. There was an issue with the flight, and I ended up on an Air France flight, and they obviously have a different catalog, and I was devastated that I didn't get to finish the series on the way back.
That is devastating, actually.
Yeah.
Shout out Dr. Orna. Okay, we interviewed her. She's on this very channel. Okay, so we're talking about money for kids. Let's start with a basic one. How to best save for kids. Is it 100% regular investment accounts, a 529, 50/50, or other?
I would say yes, which is to mean it could be 50/50. It could be just I don't think just 529. 529 is a nice supplemental thing to use. There are a lot of states where you do not get a tax benefit. Let me explain what a 529 is.
Yeah, that'd be good.
So a 529, sometimes they'll say a 529 college savings plan. It's a 529 education savings plan. You can use it for educational expenses really from the time they're quite young, kindergarten especially, all the way through. They have recently expanded what counts as a qualifying educational expense, including things like paying for, I believe, like SAT fees and the like, but most people focus on it being a way to invest and save up for college. There's not much of a tax benefit of using a 529 plan because there is no federal tax deduction for setting one up. And some states, New York State being one of them, does give you a state tax benefit, but not all states do. So it's not like an HSA or an FSA or an IRA or other types of investing accounts where you're investing for different things in your future. You don't get a huge tax break, but it's still a nice way to set money aside, investing it for your child's future. Your child is the beneficiary of the account. So it is in their name, needs to be attached to their social security number. You could have grandparents contribute to it, aunts, uncles. It could be, where money goes for birthdays, holidays, et cetera, et cetera. It can be a really great tool for people. What I don't love about it is that obviously it has to be used for a qualified educational expense. If your child elects not to go to a college or a similar vocational school that is covered, there is a tax penalty for taking that money out for a non-qualifying expense. I believe it's 10% on top of whatever the other tax rate would be, kind of similar to breaking into your IRA early. I could be misquoting the exact number, but there is a penalty for using it in a different way. But recent rules have changed where you could also roll some of that money over into a Roth IRA for your child. So what I really like a 529 for is that you can kind of mentally think of it as a future generational wealth generating account where you're setting this money aside, and if your child either elects not to go to college, maybe they get full ride scholarship to college, and the account's kind of a moot thing, you can take there's all sorts of loopholes around it. Like if you have scholarship money, if XYZ happens, but you could roll it over slowly but surely over time into a Roth IRA for their future, so you're setting them up in a different way. I like a taxable brokerage account because it gives you a lot of flexibility. No, there's no tax benefit to doing it, but it gives you a ton of flexibility in terms of how you're investing and saving up for your child's future. You can do a little bit of both. If you want to set up a 529 because family members want to contribute to it, great. And you could also just have a plain old savings account on top of all of that as well that you just kind of mentally earmark for your child. But if we're thinking really long term, especially things like college, or you want to be able to provide them with a down payment on their house in like 25 years, please be investing for those really long-term goals because that's where the real wealth can happen. I feel like I got, bogged down in the 529s, taxable specific. Was there more to that question?
These girls like getting in the weeds.
Was there more to that question?
Nope.
Okay. Moving on.
Okay. Tips for monthly budgeting for kids, meaning little things like clothes, changes to groceries, etc., not for university.
It's kind of like any other thing with your budget that can be, I don't want to say volatile, that's not the right word, but variable. Anything that can be variable in your budget, even if you have a pet, that's going to be potentially different costs. If you have a vet visit one week, if you have to do a special medication, all of that. There's no good answer to this because it depends on how you budget. Like, do you just have a bucket That's how you do variable expenses in your household. Do you want to have a line item in your budget that's kid? And maybe you put $300 a month in there that is just specifically for incidentals. Like they need a new pair of shoes. They're growing so fast. They need a couple new pairs of clothes for XYZ thing. They need a haircut. Like it depends. I would just have a variable line item in your budget. And then if you don't spend it in the month, it just slowly accumulates over time. And then you've got a nice little cushion. Sure, you're going to have changes when you have a kid. Like for a period of time, you might be buying formula, diapers, wipes, all of these things that sure are expensive. But I bet you're also doing other things way less, like going out to eat, socializing in particular ways. You'd be surprised how the ebbs and flows can kind of just even each other out a little bit at different phases. And then stuff changes so fast. Oh, we had to use, I breastfed for a while, and then we had to switch to formula when my supply dried up. And then all of a sudden she was off both of those things and just on regular whole milk. Things are constantly changing. So the other thing is just be in touch with your budget every single month, just as you always should be. I would just always add in a cushion, like a couple $100 extra, like $250 budget that's just called buffer every month for random incidentals that might pop up that you were previously unprepared for, especially if your kid is in daycare and prone to getting sick and you're having to go to the doctor more than expected, co-pays, medicine, depending on the type of insurance you have, or if you have to be, paying for additional childcare that you didn't totally expect because maybe you need a babysitter to come in because you have to get to work and daycare's not taking your child because they have a fever, et cetera, et cetera. You still ethically should disclose to any human who's coming in that they could get sick from your child. But point being, having a buffer, then just maybe calling it buffer, can be really helpful.
What are the advantages, if any, to getting married if there is no plan to have kids?
That's a both of us one. I don't think there is a ton of advantage of getting married unless you have the tax benefits. It's certain income levels.
Benefits, yeah. And there are workarounds for things like power of attorney,
yeah,
will and testament, all of that kind of stuff. You don't necessarily need to be married to someone. I don't know. I like being family. I like having the sort of social status that confers. Like people look at you a different way and treat you a different way in terms of relation to each other. I think weddings are nice, although you can famously, like our 10th anniversary party is going to be way bigger than our wedding was, so you can do a party whenever for whatever, so you don't necessarily need it. I think if it means something to you, great. If it doesn't, then no need. But I do think that like it should only be entered into if it's a financial benefit. I don't think, like, I think, as I've discussed in a previous episode, I think a lot of women sacrifice quite a bit of financial autonomy on the altar of marriage and combining finances. So I heavily recommend a prenup. I also heavily recommend, as I've always said, a woman have her own money as well. But yeah, I think marriage is ultimately a social construct, but it's also a legal and financial one. So make sure that it's legally and financially to your advantage. I think also, like, I don't know, I think for a lot of people, there is a kind of need to justify choices which are often kind of ineffable. And I don't think that we necessarily, like, another one is the whole, like, naming convention. Like, some people don't change their name. Some people do. Some people do a hyphen. It's, it's all arbitrary, ultimately. And what is meaningful to you is enough. I've well on the record saying I, in 90% of cases, don't think a woman should propose to a man for reasons that I'm not even going to unpack on here because it doesn't matter. But my biggest concern is that, again, make sure as a woman that you're shored up financially and that you're not doing anything that's going to potentially penalize you financially or remove some of your financial agency. That would be a big one.
Yeah, to be clear, when I got married, I was very on the fence about having kids. So before we got married, I said, if kids are important to you, if that is a deal breaker, we can't get married. Because I really was not sure at that time. And it took about 4 years of our marriage for me to make up my mind about whether or not I wanted kids. So I certainly didn't go into marriage thinking, well, we're going to have kids, so this is advantageous for both of us to be married. I agree. It is really interesting that society confers more weight to the title of, spouse compared to partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, what have you. And it is nice to have, the certain securities in terms of legal protections and next of kin, easy access to things if something goes wrong. Obviously, that in most states, that is paperwork that you can do yourself. You have to pay a lot of money for that. Like doing a full estate plan, you're looking at thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to pay for something that just signing a marriage license grants you, which is pretty wild because a marriage license is quite cheap at the end of the day.
I'm going to clarify a tiny bit on my stance about women not proposing. But I also think it's a total misconception that you need to have children in order for domestic labor to have value, right? Because like even if you're just a spouse who is taking on a disproportionate amount of domestic labor so that your husband's career can thrive or he can advance further, which is often the case as well, even irrespective of children, like that has value. That has both value in terms of its own intrinsic labor, but it also has value in terms of his career opportunities as a result of not having to take on as much labor at home as he would have as a single person. Again, you may be in a unique situation. That is just how the majority of hetero marriage plays out. It is the woman who takes the bigger hit at home and the man who earns more outside of it. Again, you can correct for that in other ways, but that is typically how it works out. And because of that, if the man is reticent to further tilt the financial game in the woman's favor, should things not work out, that to me is a red flag.
The other pieces, if you are not going to get married, but you're going to do things like buy property together,
right,
have a home together, you better have legal contracts about who gets what the equity is, whose name's on deeds. You both better be having some level of protection around that. If your partner already owns property and you're just moving in and you're not married, anything happens to him or her, well, next of kin will inherit. And if you have no will saying that it's you, it's probably parents or siblings of the person who just died. So you would lose your partner and get kicked out of your house all at the same time. There is if you break up, you're just out with no equity. Also, please do not have joint accounts if you are unmarried. Maybe just one small basic one for very small shared bills if that makes your life easier, but you better be putting the tiniest amount of money into that account, because if it's a joint account, both parties legally are allowed to drain it. So if your partner leaves, they can drain the account and walk away, and there's very little recourse other than taking them to small claims court. Even that might not hold up because they legally had right to the money that was in that account. Or if you're going through a divorce, sure, it can get acrimonious, but there is a whole judge involved, or at least mediation about what is fair, especially if there was not a prenup, et cetera, et cetera. So just know that while being married can also, in certain cases, put women specifically at a disadvantage, being unmarried but living as if you're married, but without the actual legal protections of being married, can very much put you at a disadvantage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Also, never pay a man's mortgage.
Yes, unless your name is on everything.
Yeah, like you better be on that deed. He better put you on the deed if you're going to be paying his rent.
Yes. Like don't even pay him rent. I feel very strongly
me
about
too.
that.
Give it to a landlord if that's but like to have your man be your landlord is crazy. Mm-hmm. And every time I talk about this, it's chirp, chirp, chirp in the comments about how like their relationship's different. Their marriage is different. I hear you. I believe that it is for some of you. But these stats, we're talking about averages here. And on average, women get screwed on the division of labor, period. They just do. We have the data. And that gets way worse when you have a kid, and it's never compensated or taken into account. Like, there should be a value to that, especially not just because domestic labor has a value, but because your domestic labor is allowing him to increase his earning potential at the cost of yours. So if anything happens, it's not just marital assets accrued during the marriage, it's your future earning potential that is drastically impacted. That needs to be accounted for and often isn't. And again, you can account for it without marriage, but most people don't go through the work of doing it. They just don't.
Yeah.
And similarly with the rent, like, could it all work out? Yes, but it's about playing the odds. And if someone is reticent to make sure that you're taken care of, even if they're not with you, because that to me, I'm not going to put it in the category of abusive, but it's
negligent.
It's negligent to say that I only want you to be shored up financially if we're together.
Yeah.
If you leave me, then you're screwed.
Or if I die. Like, that's the thing that I really think people forget about. Have life insurance, but if you are cohabitating and you moved into your partner's house that they own, they have to have a will that states that at the bare minimum, you get to live in that home.
For a certain amount of time.
Yes, for a period of time, and that whoever inherits it can't just come in and kick you out.
Which happens. I'm literally following the TikTok saga of a woman who exactly that happened to her.
It is so common. Like, people, even if you have a super copacetic relationship with their parents or siblings or adult children, whatever it is, you don't know how someone's going to behave in a grief-stricken moment, or you just don't know.
The demons jump out when someone dies, and you get all types of family coming from all necks of the woods to be like, I mean, I've seen it happen time and time again. I've heard about it. It's happening right now in a friend's family. The behavior that is being exhibited by some of these adult children over a really relatively small amount of money and an enormous headache for the person that is involved directly. It is crazy the way people will behave. And the only protection to that is either a contract that you draft up outside of marriage, because I will not gaslight and say that you can only receive these benefits in the context of marriage. A lot of that is just societal status, and that's true. But you also have to go to the effing trouble of drafting this up.
And the cost.
If you're dating a man and living in his house, he can change the locks on you overnight and then report you for trespassing. And if you don't think that a man wouldn't do that if he's petty enough, oh, please. Famously happened to Tinsley Mortimer.
Yep.
With all the resources Tinsley Mortimer had. That dude, by the way, recently was dragged back to jail because he strangled a woman.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Scary, scary, scary. But Tinsley Mortimer of Gossip Girl fame / Real Housewives of New York fame, she was dating a man living with him in Florida, and he changed the locks on her and called the cops on her, and she has that on her record forever, that she was basically stalking him.
Yep.
Couldn't have happened if she were either on the deed or they were married. Could not have happened.
Yep.
Don't trust a hoe. Don't trust a hoe. And I just I'm so sick of some of you guys, because I just have to say this last thing. Most of you guys are great, but there's a contingent in this comment section every time. It's why are you so negative? Why are you so negative? It's an ounce of prevention is worth an eternity of I wish I had. Be careful. Protect yourself.
I will also tag on people who are leaving those comments and to all of us. Are you the exact same person that you were 5 years ago?
Nope.
How about 10 years ago? Because same thing happens with your partner. Everybody changes and evolves, and you might be in the most blissful, copacetic situation right now. But as you two evolve, if you don't evolve together, things can change in the relationship. It's a lot of hard work to stay together and stay committed and evolve as individuals and as a couple. And it's not going to happen for everybody. So even if you have the most blissed out situation right now, that does not mean it's going to be the same in a decade or two. So it is just so short-sighted to think, well, it's this way now, so it will be this way forever. Literally never how life works.
Literally never. Literally never. Trying to save money for our kids, is it better to buy and pay off an apartment in 20 years or to invest and buy something later?
That's 6 in 1, because you don't know. You don't
don't know.
Where are you buying it? Do you feel like that area is going to appreciate in such a way it would beat the stock market? I don't know. I will say having housing security and a somewhat locked in housing expense, obviously property taxes change, little things will change, expenses will come up with the house, but to not be at the whims of the rental market in really high cost of living cities can be extremely beneficial when financially planning for kids, because it's something that you can a little bit control for, as opposed to, we live in a 1-bedroom apartment right now. It costs us $3,200. We want to move to a 2-bedroom apartment. That's going to cost us $5,000. But if you bought a home that is a 2-bed that you can grow in for a long period of time, and you're building equity, and the cost is about the same as a rental, or maybe even less, or even a little bit more, it's still a bit more control. And then in 5 years, if the rental market has gone even more bananas, but your housing costs are still pretty locked in because you own, that can provide a lot of peace of mind. So I would also say, for you mentally, what feels better? Is it the idea of being able to control for a certain cost within reason? Again, homeownership does not negate other unexpected expenses. Or is it wanting flexibility to be able to move without having to sell a home, be able to go after different jobs, be able to move neighborhoods or locations? Is it I want to move to a better school district so my child can go to public school and I don't have to pay for private school? There are so many factors that you have to consider here. This is not remotely a cut and dry answer, but it really has to do with what makes you feel most secure. And either way, buying property that ultimately could appreciate that you could pass on to your children, or investing in the stock market that will appreciate that you could pass on to your child, or at least help pay for a big expense in the future, or simply not be a financial burden to your child in the future. All of that is ways of financially setting up your child for success.
Slay. Are you aware of any research about the best ages to explain various money topics to children?
Yes, there is actually a decent amount of research out there, especially that most kids are starting to develop an emotional relationship to money by about 7. So it starts much younger than you think. The other thing that's going to be tricky, and I don't feel like there's enough research on right now because we're still too early in it, is how living in a very cashless society is going to impact how kids interpret and understand money. Because what they're seeing now is us tapping our phones, tapping our cards, tapping our watches, and just walking out with something, as opposed to seeing people ever hand over cash, heaven forbid, write a check. I don't even think any of them are going to know how to do that. There are different kind of gimmicky ways that you can start to introduce the concept of money and introduce how money works to children as they age. One of my favorite ones I've ever heard is a woman shared the story of what her dad did, which is he took out in cash all the money that he and her mom earned in a month, put it on a table, and then started to sort it into piles and said, this is how much we spend on the house. This is how much we spend on utilities. This is how much we spend on, just going down the line of their budget. And then showed, this is how much we save. This is how much we invest. And then this pile is what we have left over for doing certain fun things every month. So when you ask for certain things, it's all coming from this pile, but we are saving for this family vacation and we're planning to do this fun thing. And you never have to worry about us, losing the house or not being able to pay for XYZ because we're doing this to provide. You want to make sure that you're not ever coming from a place of scarcity when talking to your child about money, even if the reality is that there might be a scarcity issue in the home. You want to try to speak from a place of power, but pragmatism at the same time. I really would appreciate if people who could afford things never say to their children, well, we just can't afford that, especially if it's untrue. It's much better to tell your children the reality of, you already have 10 pairs of sneakers and this is not something, I understand it's something that you want, but it's not something that we're going to buy for you this month. Or coming from the place of, we're going to give you X amount of money every month. There's a lot about whether or not you should pay for chores. I'm going to leave you to do all that research yourself and decide if you want to do paying for chores or just giving an allowance. But at some point, giving children access to the ability to earn money for themselves so that you can also teach them, hey, if you want this toy, that's great. Here's how much it costs. I want you to save up for it. And we're going to work on having you save for it, and then you can go buy it yourself, as opposed to you providing and buying all the time, or a grandparent or an aunt and uncle. Giving kids a level of ability to earn and then spend, save, tithe, charitably donate, spend their own money is really important too. You are pretty much solely responsible for your child's adulthood relationship with money, so keep that in mind with how you talk about it with each other, talk about it to your child, talk about it to yourself, the content that you're consuming around it. I know that sounds like a lot of pressure, but we really do build our relationships to money at such young ages that it's what is being modeled for us in our homes by the people that are raising us that tells us everything about how to relate to money and impacts people in such dramatic ways in their adulthood. So lead by example in that regard. If you have to heal your own relationship with money in order to give that to your child, please make the effort to do so. I so strongly believe that financial literacy and a confident relationship with money is one of the best things that we can pass on, particularly if you're thinking like, well, I'm probably not going to be able to pass on an immense amount of wealth or even a modest amount of wealth to my child. Passing on the ability to feel confident with money is in of itself a certain kind of wealth.
I agree. Also, like, children especially, but human beings in general don't learn as much from instruction as they do from example. You know, you can give them whatever speech you want to give them, but if what you're showing them doesn't align with that, or what you're doing doesn't align with that, ultimately the lesson that will be taken is the latter.
Yep.
And just like having grown up in an environment where people didn't really have much, and childhood just felt so based on so many other things. And part of that's generational, right? Like, children just were a lot less stimulated 30 years ago, quite literally. Like, we had to make our own fun in a way that, like,
watch the raindrop come down the window.
Totally. But like but like there was like a level of, there was just not a social, and this is, by the way, like totally data driven, right? Jonathan Haidt actually has a really excellent book on this topic, but life was not even a fraction of as kid-centric as it is now 30 years ago. Like, we are just, society has tilted to optimize toward children and to like engage them at all times in a way that is like basically historically unprecedented and has changed radically in just 30 years, not even. So obviously part of it is generational and technological, right? But the other part of it is financial, and growing up in an environment where children didn't have much, and then now being in a life situation where almost every child around me has so much. One thing I think is like very striking to me is how like spoiling a child happens. Like, and I understand that, like, I mean, I love, for example, spoiling my nieces, and I love, you know, being able to do things with them that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do in their day-to-day lives. So I'm certainly not exempt from like the joy that is. And of course I rationalize it by saying, well, you know, this is a very rare occasion for them, a few times a year that I get to do really special things with them, or, you know, obviously helping provide for things in the long term that they maybe otherwise wouldn't have. But even that is like a question, right? Of like, where does that, you know, where does care end and spoiling begin? It's a question for everyone, right? And it's, you see how like desirable that is to do, and how the positive feedback loop that it is. Like, children's love is easy to buy when they're little. It's very easy to buy. And I think sometimes, like, it's never, as a child-free woman, it's never my place to like look at another mother and be like, or another father, although I don't interact with the fathers generally, so like, what do I give a shit what they're doing? But the mothers, and be like, I don't know about this one, diva, like, this feels like a lot for a 4-year-old, you know, or like, this feels like, I don't know what we're doing here. But I do think that like, that is something that like, when you combine a ton of financial resources, a ton of people in a child's life who want to cater to them and spoil them, and then the moment that we're in societally and technologically, where like children are becoming more and more and more used to being like, I don't know what the word is, but like, they're used to like their dopamine going off 24/7 now. Like, I just feel like if you're not in a place of scarcity, the most important thing you can ask yourself on a day-to-day basis is like, what message am I conveying to this tiny little developing mind about how nice life is supposed to be 24/7? Because like, that's like, when I talk to like my friends who are early education teachers, they're like, children, like, if they're not being given dopamine 24/7 now, they crash out immediately. Like, they can't self-soothe, they can't be bored, they can't sit still. Like, and so when you combine that with like total financial ease, I just like, I do feel like we're, and it's like hyperbolic to say like, oh, the like people from WALL-E, but like, you kind of feel that way. Like, when you see children sometimes who are like at these like luxurious restaurants with an iPad glued to their face, like, surrounded by toys that they're not even touching. I'm like, we're raising all these children to be like Henry VIII. Like, what's going on? This is crazy.
There's so much that's so complicated
I know.
about all of it.
I know.
The screen thing particularly is interesting because we're also starting to see a shift in the conversation where the children of very wealthy people are the ones who are more likely to be going screen free, and the more overworked the parents, the more likely the child is to have screen access, where 10, 15 years ago, the access to screens and technology generally was considered something that only the wealthy were doing and had access to. And it's starting to really flip in terms of socioeconomics and how it's being perceived as a tool, which is fascinating in of itself. And partly because kids who had a lot of access to screens who are young are starting to now get old enough that we're seeing repercussions of what that did and didn't do for them. And it's hard, you know, like a restaurant situation, depending on the type of kid you have, you want to be out as a parent, and then, you know, you're stressed about what everybody else is going to think if your kid is fussing, so you stick this thing in front of them that's going to quiet them. Like, I understand why a lot of people do it. Is it personally how I operate? No, but that also just might be because of the way that my kid interacts with certain things, and she's easy to engage in different ways, and she's still really little. I would always encourage people to keep in mind, especially if you do have the financial resources, that you should never give your child everything that they ask for. They need to understand that it's not just an endless buffet of access to everything. And it should never always be constantly about them. Even something as simple as if we're at the dinner table and my daughter's done and she starts going, all done, all done, all done, all done. I'm still already starting to say, I see that you're done. We're not done. We're going to finish eating, and then we will all go from the table together, as opposed to like, okay, you're done. You can go play with your toys. Like, no, sit with us, and we're going to finish our meal. And it's not always about an immediate yes to acquiescing to what you want because you're the little human. It's just a small thing that I'm choosing to do. Whether it's the right thing, I don't know. We'll find out. Maybe she'll resent me for it in 5 years. But it's just trying to make sure that I'm not constantly always catering to everything that she needs.
I think
Or
also
wants.
like
Obviously that's what she needs. She's not what she wants.
But I think like another underrated part of this phenomenon is that like we're having fewer and fewer children for people who do have them. Like the number of people who have only children has skyrocketed. And that in and of itself like predisposes, and it's not to say it's an always thing, but like it does predispose that child to getting a lot more resources, a lot more attention, a lot more time, money, all of that than they would if they had siblings. Mm-hmm. And so that's another thing to kind of correct for. But I do think like as society becomes more and more divided and we have essentially an underclass and an upper class and very little middle class, the lessons that a child from financial strife will take are almost, it's not totally out of the parent's control to correct for that, but like what they're going to receive mentally, psychologically, emotionally, a lot of that can't be corrected for. Mm-hmm. A lot of that can't be prevented. Simultaneously though, like I guess conversely, if you have a lot of financial flexibility, or at least a reasonable amount, you have an unusual ability to shape that child's financial experience in a way that is somewhat artificial and it is somewhat under your direction and care. Like if a child has to like get free or subsidized lunch at school and like can't afford new clothes and like is worried about being evicted and like all of those things, like it is very, 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 very hard to put a buffer between the child and that trauma or that at least awareness. Often also if you're like arguing about money a lot or like whatever, like children pick up on that. They pick up on it more than they pick up on whatever it is that you're telling them. If you do have resources, though, you do have an unusually high ability to manage that child's experience in terms of the lessons that they do receive and how they perceive their own financial situation. And like, I do just feel like when you look at the macro trends of early childhood development in this country, like I just feel personally very worried about the expectations that we are raising children with, again, in terms of how much life and the world is meant to be adapted to them, but also like how much they're willing to go without on like a truly like mental health level. Like being denied something is like traumatic for children, even something that's like fun, you know, like it just seems very worrisome. So like if you have the ability to like modify that experience, I feel like you should. But a lot of people don't. I don't know what we're going to do, but I know teachers are quitting in droves, and part of that is they're not paid enough, but also part of it is that like they now have classes that are entirely made up of children who can't learn.
Yeah, who can't regulate in a lot of ways.
Who can't regulate.
Yeah, like the emotional regulation is hard. I think when that instant gratification feedback loop has been initiated so much at such a young age, I find it interesting to sometimes reflect back on certain things that my parents did too that still resonate with me as an adult in certain ways that they taught me about money. And I do think that you have to acknowledge that it has to be kid specific. I think certain lessons that worked really well on me didn't necessarily resonate with my sister and vice versa. And that's the other piece of advice I would also give is especially if you have more than one kid, to make sure that you're adapting to how your child learns, receives information, interacts with the environment around them, and adapt your style to make sure that it's actually going to resonate with the kid that you're dealing with, as opposed to, I heard this on a YouTube video, I saw this on TikTok, this seems like a smart thing to do. And it might be for one of your kids, and it might not work well for the other, and you need to adapt to it and make sure that you are giving the messaging, passing on the lessons. And this again is speaking more towards people who have the resources. It's an incredible burden on so many levels to not even be able to have basic needs met for yourself personally as an adult, and to also not be able to provide that for your child. Like the anguish that must cause, I truly can't.
And I will say this, I know that this is a controversial thing in more progressive spaces to say, but I have to say it. Sometimes it can't be avoided, but if you can avoid bringing a child into an extremely financially unstable situation, it is, I believe your ethical responsibility to do so, because that is so unfair to that child. And like, you may think that you're doing everything right, but like, again, the factors that make poverty and precarity incredibly stressful on a child's brain are out of your control for the most part. And children get more from their peers socially and from the outside world than they do from their own homes. So even if you're doing everything right, like that is just, it is such an uphill battle for that kid, especially in a country where something as simple as going to the doctor is something not available to everyone equally. And I think about how much of our work for so many people is just unlearning all of the like really, really, really traumatic shit that they internalized from growing up on the like knife's edge of poverty. And again, sometimes it can't be avoided. Sometimes we fall into poverty. Sometimes circumstances conspire, of course. But if you have the ability to control for it, and even just waiting a few years, even just setting a few baseline parameters around when you consider yourself financially ready, it can make a world of difference, because children don't ask to be brought into the world, and like they don't get to choose their circumstances, and like the mental tax and burden that it puts on a child to grow up in that environment is, if it can be avoided, again, not saying never have kids, but like if we can time this even a little bit, like to try to is crucial, because you can give the best lessons you want to, but like at a certain, and I'm not talking about like, okay, maybe we don't have as much as our neighbor or whatever. I'm talking about like if we are struggling on a day-to-day basis to put food on the table, to keep a roof over our head, etc., like be so careful, because children, there's really nothing you can do to not make that extremely traumatic for the child. There's really nothing. On that joyous note, and yes, of course, I think the welfare state should be much more comprehensive, and no one should be in this position. Of course, I think that. I'm talking about dealing on a day-to-day basis with the cards that we have right this minute. That's all. Don't come for me. Erin, tell us about your 17 newsletters.
So if you want more parenting type takes, not advice, but on erinlowry.substack.com, I write a newsletter called My Name Isn't Mom, which is kind of what it sounds like. It's essays and thoughts about modern motherhood. To be clear, I really love being a mom, but it's about the identity shift into motherhood and what that looks like. And then also on brokemillennial.substack.com, you can find my hopefully helpful newsletter where I do give advice on all things around money, relationships, parenting, and kind of whatever's on my mind that week. And you can find me on Instagram at brokemillennialblog.
And I will see you guys next week on an all new Asked and Answered. Bye.